Right now, somewhere in the outskirts of Eastern Europe, there is a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And their primary life experience basically consists of playing first-person shooters.
Right, like Call of Duty or something.
Exactly. And this kid can use a $500 piece of molded plastic to just instantly vaporize a $10.5 million state-of-the-art military asset.
It is wild to think about.
It is the entire mathematical foundation of global warfare, like the basic assumption that the side with the most expensive, heaviest machinery automatically wins. It's completely broken.
Yeah, I mean, it's a total inversion of the industrial era power dynamic.
How so?
Well, for the last century, military dominance was essentially a math equation based on gross domestic product and steel production, right? Build bigger ships, heavier tanks, faster jets.
Just sheer mass and money.
Exactly. But today, massive financial investment can actually create a massive vulnerability. We're watching the dawn of an asymmetric paradigm shift.
Where agility and software are just violently dismantling mass and armor.
That's spot on.
So that sets the mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking the rapidly mutating nature of global conflict, the, frankly, really perilous state of modern military funding, and the unseen asymmetric threats looming on the horizon.
And we're pulling this from the deeply granular frontline experiences of Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon.
Right. He's a veteran tank commander and one of the world's leading chemical weapons experts.
Yeah, his insights are incredible.
They really are. And for you listening, we want to make it clear that this isn't some abstract academic debate about distant geopolitics.
No, not at all.
We are breaking down the invisible economic and technological forces that are actively reshaping the security apparatus of the world you are walking around in right this very second.
Yeah, because looking at these sources, it provides this raw, unfiltered window into a massive transition.
Right.
We're hurtling away from the traditional symmetric tank battles that define the 20th century straight into this chaotic era of AI-driven, autonomous, and biological warfare.
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's happening now.
It is. But to understand the severity of this shift, we have to look at the baseline first.
Meaning where we are starting from today.
Exactly. We have to examine where Western militaries stand today, and specifically Britain's, because that serves as a prime case study in our sources.
Yeah, we really have to talk about the physical downsizing because the numbers here are genuinely jarring.
They are.
I mean, when the colonel first joined the British Army, we are looking at a force of roughly 150,000 personnel and 1,000 tanks.
For a very formidable force.
Right. But today, that has plummeted to about 70,000 personnel and just 148 tanks.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a 90% reduction in core armored capability. I just have to ask, how does a G7 nation, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, allow its conventional deterrent to hollow out to that extreme?
Well, it really comes down to the insidious psychology of the peace dividend following the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The peace dividend, right?
Yeah. For nearly 50 years, the existential terror of the Cold War justified colossal, unblinking defense spending.
Because the threat was always right there.
Exactly. So when the Berlin Wall fell, politicians across the Western world just rushed to cash in. The fundamental assumption was that large-scale, mechanized land wars in Europe were, just a historical relic.
It's that classic end-of-history fallacy.
Precisely.
Like, everyone assumed we had crossed the finish line of major state-on-state conflicts so we could just pack up the heavy armor and focus on globalization.
And that specific fallacy dictated strategy for 2 solid decades.
Just a complete pivot.
Yes, the focus pivoted entirely toward counterinsurgency, primarily operations in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Which is a very different type of fighting.
Entirely different. Counterinsurgency requires a radically different architecture. It demands light, mobile infantry, specialized human intelligence, and massive nation-building logistics. So by hyper-focusing on fighting localized insurgencies, Western militaries allowed their conventional large-scale warfighting apparatus to just completely atrophy.
So they essentially lost the institutional muscle memory of how to fight a pure adversary.
Exactly.
But surely recovering that capability isn't just about going out and buying new tanks. It's about rebuilding the entire logistical supply chain that supports them, right?
Yes, which is astronomically expensive.
I can imagine.
A recent strategic defense review in the UK actually identified a £28 billion funding gap.
Wait, 28 billion?
28 billion pounds, yeah. That is the chasm between the military capability they currently possess and the capability required to present a credible conventional deterrent against a modern, heavily armed state.
I mean, 28 billion pounds isn't just a gap. That's an abyss.
It really is.
But the data makes it clear that this isn't just an oversight by the Defense Ministry. This is a deliberate byproduct of political reality and domestic prioritization.
Yeah, the underlying tension here is between long-term strategic defense and the short-term incentives of political cycles.
Because politicians want to get reelected.
Right. Elected officials are typically optimizing for a 4 to 5 year window. And in peacetime, defense spending rarely wins elections.
Voters want immediate, tangible benefits.
Exactly. Just to put the priorities in perspective, the data shows that current welfare spending is roughly 6 times the size of the defense budget.
Wow, 6 times.
Yeah.
And there is a very specific and highly debated paradox brought up in the source regarding industrial strategy and net zero projects.
Right. The observation made by the subject is that immense government capital is being aggressively funneled toward net zero initiatives, while the fundamental building blocks of national defense are basically starved for cash.
Yeah, and we're just reporting what's in the text here.
Absolutely. Furthermore, he points out a glaring contradiction in the industrial strategy.
That's
Well, there is this stated ambition to build a robust domestic defense manufacturing base, right? But it is severely bottlenecked by the fact that the UK has some of the highest industrial electricity prices in the developed world.
Oh, that makes manufacturing anything incredibly expensive.
Exactly. And independent of where one sits on the political spectrum regarding climate policy, the core argument he's making here is hierarchical.
Meaning you have to do things in a certain order.
Right, that a nation must definitively secure its borders and sovereignty before it has the luxury of executing grand societal-level transformations.
It's basically Maslow's hierarchy of national needs.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, you can't put fancy solar panels on the roof if the foundation of the house is crumbling.
Exactly.
But let's look at how this financial starvation actually manifests on the ground. Because it isn't just a lack of funds, is it?
No, it's also the glacial bureaucratic inefficiency of how the remaining money actually gets spent.
Yeah, the contrast between peacetime stagnation and wartime innovation is just staggering.
It really is night and day.
Like, look at the current ecosystem in Ukraine. In the crucible of an active existential threat, if a Ukrainian frontline unit dreams up a modification for a commercial drone, that idea can be prototyped, field-tested, and deployed across the entire front in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, they are literally crowdsourcing weapons development in real time.
See, it's amazing.
But contrast that agility with the standard peacetime procurement apparatus in the West.
Oh, it's painful.
It is. The Ajax reconnaissance vehicle is the perfect emblem of this dysfunction.
Right, the Ajax.
It has been 10 years in the making,
Yeah.
plagued by shifting specifications, bloated contracts, and technical failures.
Didn't it actually hurt the test crews?
Yes, it literally caused hearing damage to its early test crews because of severe vibration issues.
That is insane.
And a decade later, it is still not fully operational on the front line.
See, this is where the budget cuts move from just being a bureaucratic annoyance to outright negligence. Because even the brand new equipment that is miraculously making it through the pipeline is being deliberately compromised to save a few pennies.
Yes, and the new Challenger 3 tank is a prime example of that.
Right. So to survive on a modern battlefield, which is basically a hornet's nest of FPV drones right now, a tank requires active protection systems.
What they call hard-kill defensive aid suites.
Right. And these are automated systems that detect incoming projectiles and actually shoot them down before they strike the armor.
Exactly. And a main battle tank realistically requires 4 or 5 of these suites to provide a comprehensive 360-degree dome of protection against drone swarms.
So you need full coverage.
Right.
But because of that 28 billion pound shortfall we talked about, they're currently only funded to install 1 or 2 of these defensive suites on each tank.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, it is literally the equivalent of buying a multi-million-dollar supercar, but refusing to pay for the airbags or the anti-theft system or even the insurance just to save a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, it's totally self-defeating.
The moment you pull it out of the dealership, it's a massive liability. Like, if you are only protecting the front of the tank, a $50 drone just flies around and hits the back.
Which is exactly what's happening.
Which begs the question, if you are a tank commander, what does it do to your psyche to know you are being sent into a combat zone in a partially equipped, highly vulnerable vehicle?
It shatters you. I mean, it absolutely shatters you.
It has to.
A compromised vehicle isn't just a degraded physical asset. It is a profound psychological wound to the crew.
Which really transitions us directly from the hardware deficit to the human cost of a hollowed-out military.
Yeah, because the human element is the glue holding all of this together.
There is a maxim cited from the military community in the source that perfectly captures this. Morale is to the physical as 10 is to 1.
That ratio is everything.
10 to 1.
Yes. It dictates that the psychological fortitude of a soldier, their absolute belief in the mission, their implicit trust in their command structure, and their confidence that their gear will keep them alive. All of that is 10 times more critical than their raw numbers or the technical specifications of their rifle.
Because morale is the invisible engine that propels a human being forward into incoming fire, right?
Exactly. When every biological instinct is screaming at them to flee, morale keeps them moving.
And the data indicates a massive hemorrhage in morale within the British military post-2012.
Yeah, when operations in Iraq and Afghanistan began to wind down, the operational tempo just collapsed.
The garrison rot set in.
Precisely. A professional military force is analogous to an elite athletic team. They require constant, high-stakes practice to maintain their edge.
Right, you can't just sit on the bench for years.
Exactly. Without regular deployments, you get boredom. The sense of purpose evaporates, and highly trained operators simply leave for the private sector.
But the crisis isn't just about retention, right? It's about a deeply flawed recruitment apparatus.
Yes. The bureaucracy is actively keeping top-tier talent out of the ranks.
There is this maddening account in the source of a highly qualified consultant surgeon who wanted to commission into the Army.
Yeah, a fully trained, practicing medical professional.
In any logical paradigm, a military would fast-track that individual through the gates, throw out the red carpet.
You would think so. But she was rejected.
Blocked from joining because, according to an inflexible algorithmic checklist, she had taken a generic mental health medication when she was 10 years old.
It's just absurd.
The computer simply threw a red flag, and that was the end of it.
It is an extreme manifestation of risk aversion. Peacetime bureaucracies become terrified of liability.
Yeah.
But this rigidity isn't just medical. The force also points out how it extends into corporate governance initiatives being grafted onto military structures.
Right, and again, we're just reporting what the subject argues here.
Exactly. There is a documented critique in the text regarding certain diversity, equity, and inclusion targets impacting recruitment.
Specifically, an incident where an officer was allegedly instructed to halt the hiring of, quote, useless white pilots to ensure demographic quotas were met.
Right.
So let's look at this strictly through the lens of combat effectiveness as the source presents it. If you broaden the demographic pool, don't you inherently increase your raw number of potential recruits? Why is this such a point of friction for them?
Well, according to the source, the friction arises when quotas supersede capability.
Okay, make that clear.
The operational argument is that the tip of the spear must remain a ruthless, uncompromising meritocracy. Combat is the ultimate equalizer, right?
Yep.
Bullets, shrapnel, and drone strikes do not care about a soldier's demographic background.
They just don't.
Exactly. In a catastrophic ambush, your survival hinges entirely on the raw competence, aggression, and tactical proficiency of the person covering your flank.
Nothing else matters in that moment.
Right. So the argument presented by the subject is that introducing any metric into the recruitment or promotion process other than the absolute ability to execute violence and win, well, it compromises the integrity of the unit.
It's a culture clash between HR compliance and frontline survival.
Very much so.
And that survival instinct is already being pushed to the absolute limit. We should examine the psychology of medical support, because the shift in how modern wars are fought is honestly terrifying.
Yeah, we have to contrast the recent past with the immediate present here.
Okay.
During the counterinsurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan, despite the horrific realities of those wars, Western forces operated with a massive psychological safety net.
Total air superiority.
Exactly. They knew that if an IED went off, a highly synchronized medical evacuation chain would instantly activate.
A helicopter would be on station within minutes to pull them out.
Right, the golden hour medicine. There is immense comfort in knowing the cavalry is always coming.
But the frontline accounts from places like Syria paint a completely different psychological landscape.
A much darker one. Operating in Syria, or a similar contested environment, it strips away that safety net entirely.
So no golden hour.
There is no golden hour. There is no medical evacuation. The airspace is contested by hostile actors, meaning no friendly helicopters are waiting over the horizon.
Wow.
If you take a casualty, you are profoundly, terrifyingly isolated.
the psychological endurance required to step out on a patrol, knowing with absolute certainty that if things go wrong, no backup is coming.
Yeah,
It's
well,
staggering.
it is. It demands a level of morale that peacetime bureaucracies are just currently failing to foster.
Okay, so if we are facing a recruitment crisis driven by red tape, a morale crisis driven by isolation, and a hardware crisis driven by underfunding, what is the stopgap?
What do you mean?
Well, we can't buy enough tanks and we can't recruit enough humans. Are we
Right.
just defaulting to technology to fill the void?
That is precisely the adaptation taking place. And Ukraine is the real-time laboratory proving this out right now.
They really are.
They are systematically substituting mass manpower and heavy armor with cheap, hyper-lethal technological ingenuity
Ukraine is literally rewriting the doctrine of war on the fly.
every single day.
Let's look at the drone statistics, because this blew my mind. 80% lethality from drones, 20% from conventional weapons.
Yeah, it represents a total inversion of historical battlefield physics.
I mean, for over a century, heavy artillery and conventional munitions were the undisputed kings of battle.
Always. But drones have flipped that paradigm entirely. And the speed of iteration is what is truly terrifying here.
Because it's so fast.
We are watching a decade of technological evolution compressed into months.
Right. It started with electronic warfare.
Yes.
Right. It was all about controlling the electromagnetic spectrum, like broadcasting massive jamming signals to sever the connection between the enemy pilot and their drone, causing it to just drop out of the sky.
But the moment the airspace became saturated with jamming, the tactics evolved.
They adapted.
Exactly. When radio frequencies became unusable, we witnessed the introduction of drones tethered by physical fiber optic cables.
Wait, like an actual wire trailing behind a flying drone?
Yes. Because the command signal travels through a physical wire, they are entirely immune to electronic warfare.
That is wild.
It's a fascinating regression, honestly. It's
Yeah.
remarkably similar to the TOW anti-tank missiles from the 1970s and the first Gulf War, which unspooled miles of thin wire as they flew.
Wow. So they are using an analog concept to secure a cutting-edge digital asset.
Exactly.
And now they are pushing past the wire entirely. We are entering the domain of AI mother drones.
This is where it gets really sci-fi.
Yeah, these are large autonomous platforms that fly high above the jamming ceiling, navigate without GPS, and then deploy swarms of smaller kamikaze drones.
And those smaller drones use machine vision to independently identify and destroy targets without a human ever pulling a trigger.
The innovation is breathtaking, and it is entirely born from desperation.
Yeah, Ukraine lacks the industrial capacity to match Russia tank for tank or shell for shell.
Right, so they are forced into this asymmetric brilliance.
And the tactical deception is incredible.
Oh, the weather balloon decoy mechanism.
Yes.
Can you explain how a cheap balloon actually fools a multi-million-dollar air defense system?
Well, it exploits the way modern radar systems actually see the world.
Okay.
The Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense networks don't use optical cameras, right? They rely on radar cross-sections.
So they're just bouncing signals off things.
Exactly. They send out radio waves and measure what bounces back. So the Ukrainians tie a cluster of cheap drones, or sometimes just radar reflectors, to a standard high-altitude weather balloon.
And just float it up.
Yeah, floated up to 10,000 feet. And to the radar computer, this massive, erratic cluster of signals bouncing back looks exactly like a high-value target.
Like a large bomber or an expensive Reaper drone.
Precisely.
So the automated defense system reacts to the data it's fed.
Exactly. The S-400 system fires a sophisticated interceptor missile, which costs roughly $5 million, to obliterate a $75 weather balloon.
They are essentially baiting a superpower into bankrupting its own missile reserves.
Yes, and critically, while the S-400 battery is either reloading or momentarily distracted by the balloons in the upper atmosphere, the actual lethal swarm of FPV drones flies in low under the radar horizon.
And destroys the radar dishes themselves.
Exactly.
That is brilliant. Then there is the economic warfare of the Flamingo missile.
Another great example.
Ukraine essentially reverse-engineered a cruise missile, achieving a 1,000-kilometer range for roughly $500,000 per unit.
Yeah, $500,000 is a lot of money to a normal person.
Oh, for sure.
But in military procurement, that's a rounding error.
Right, because a comparable Western weapon, like an American Tomahawk cruise missile, runs about $10.5 million.
And this brings us back to the classic Sherman versus Tiger tank analogy from the Second World War.
Explain that one.
Well, the German Tiger was a marvel of engineering. Heavily armored, massive gun, technologically unmatched.
But expensive.
Very expensive and very slow to produce. The American Sherman tank was inferior in almost every one-on-one metric. However, the American industrial base could churn out 10 Shermans for every one Tiger.
So mass just overwhelmed precision.
Exactly. Today, swarms of cheat flamingos and FPV drones are acting as the new Shermans, swarming and overwhelming scarce, expensive targets.
Which fundamentally alters the demographic profile of who makes a lethal soldier today.
It really does.
You no longer need to be a physical specimen capable of wrecking 80 pounds of gear for 30 miles to project lethal force.
No, the physical requirements of the warfighter are being sidelined by cognitive processing speed and digital dexterity.
Gamer generation.
Yes, they're uniquely adapted to this environment. Piloting an FPV drone at 80 miles an hour through a bombed-out window to strike a moving target requires a level of spatial awareness and micromotor control that teenagers hone through thousands of hours of playing competitive video games.
And high-speed decision-making.
Exactly.
There's that detail about the Challenger 3 tank.
Oh, the controls.
Yeah, when you climb into the turret, the primary firing controls are essentially PlayStation-style digital joypads.
It's true.
An 18-year-old who dominates in Call of Duty could drop into a modern tank, bypass traditional mechanical training, and intuitively understand the user interface almost instantly.
I mean, lethality has been democratized. We are replacing muscle mass with raw central nervous system processing power.
Which triggers the most hotly debated question in military academies today. Is the main battle tank finally obsolete?
Yes, that is the big question.
Well, I have to push back on the tank's survival here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a $500 piece of plastic flown by a kid in a basement can rip the turret off a $10 million machine, the tank is just a massive, heavy coffin.
I see your point.
It's a losing mathematical equation. The data shows Russia has lost thousands of tanks in Ukraine. Why are we still building them?
Well, you're touching on a massive debate, but the frontline consensus argues that the tank isn't dead. Its role is just radically mutating.
Meaning how?
First, we have to contextualize the Russian losses. Russian armored doctrine historically prioritized a low profile and massive firepower over crew survivability.
Oh, the exploding turrets.
Right. Their ammunition is stored in a carousel directly under the turret, so a single drone strike causes a catastrophic detonation.
The jack-in-the-box effect.
Exactly. Western tanks, like the Challenger and the Abrams, are designed around crew protection, with blowout panels for ammunition.
And the data supports that survivability. Out of the 14 Challenger 2 tanks Britain provided to Ukraine, 13 are still actively operating.
Right, but they aren't leading massive cavalry charges across open fields anymore.
No, the tactics have shifted. They are using them essentially as heavily armored, mobile sniper rifles.
Yes, they use their superior optics to engage targets from miles away, shoot, and immediately relocate.
But if they are just hanging back, why do we need humans inside them at all?
What do you mean?
If the future tank is just a command hub tethered to a drone swarm, as the analysts suggest, why put the human commander in a heavy metal box on the front line? Why not put the commander in a concrete bunker in London and let them control the swarm remotely?
Because of latency and electronic warfare.
Latency?
Yeah. If your commander is in London, the command signal has to bounce off a satellite. That introduces a delay, maybe a second or two.
And a drone dogfight.
A 1-second delay means your swarm is destroyed. Furthermore, satellite links can be jammed or severed entirely. You need a human command node geographically close to the swarm to maintain a tight, unjammable, localized network.
I get it.
And that human node needs to be wrapped in 60 tons of composite armor, because the moment they emit a command signal, the enemy will triangulate their position and fire artillery at them.
Right.
The tank survives because the commander needs a mobile bunker to survive counter-battery fire.
Okay, that makes sense. The tank survives because the network requires a localized, heavily armored router. But if superpowers recognize that direct, conventional clashes, tank on tank, jet on jet, are prohibitively expensive and largely obsolete, how do they actually exert pressure on each other?
They stop fighting on the battlefield entirely.
You just go around it.
Precisely. They move around the conventional defenses.
Yeah.
And this requires a total reassessment of the threat vectors we actually face today.
So we need to dispel the Hollywood fantasies.
Definitely.
The analysis makes it abundantly clear. The existential threat to the West is not a Red Dawn scenario. We are not going to see Russian paratroopers dropping onto the National Mall, and we aren't going to see columns of T-90 tanks rolling into London.
No, The conventional Russian military apparatus has been so thoroughly ground down in Ukraine that a traditional land invasion of NATO is completely off the table.
Their traditional means of kinetic power projection are severely degraded.
Therefore, the theater of conflict has shifted entirely into the shadows. We are dealing with pervasive, asymmetric, and clandestine hybrid warfare.
We're talking about cyber warfare aimed at civilian infrastructure.
Yes, cyber attacks designed to cripple power grids, banking sectors, and healthcare networks.
The silent attacks.
Exactly. And we are looking at the logistics of shadow fleets.
Right. Hundreds of aging, uninsured oil tankers sailing under false flags to bypass global sanctions and fund war efforts.
It's a massive escalation in covert espionage, too. For instance, adversarial submarines deliberately dropping sensor arrays near Western naval bases.
To map the acoustic signatures of nuclear deterrent patrols.
Yes.
And it's bleeding into physical sabotage, utilizing proxies to commit arson. Intelligence agencies allegedly recruiting local criminals via social media to firebomb political targets or sabotage logistics hubs across Europe.
It's a calculated strategy of friction.
Friction, yeah.
The goal is to inflict maximum societal and economic disruption while meticulously staying just 1 millimeter below the threshold that would trigger a formal Article 5 military response from NATO.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Absolutely.
But while the shadow war is raging in the West, the actual front line in Eastern Europe is seeing a resurgence of tactics that I think most people assumed were left behind in the trenches of World War I.
Yes, specifically the normalization of chemical warfare.
It's horrifying. The tactical use of chemical agents has returned to the modern battlefield at an industrial scale.
The reports detail the widespread deployment of a substance called chloropicrin against Ukrainian trench networks.
Wait, chloropicrin, what exactly is that? Because it's not nerve gas, right?
No, it is a World War I-era agricultural fumigant. It acts as a severe riot control agent, very similar to CS tear gas.
Okay.
It causes violent irritation to the eyes, skin, and respiratory system. And to be clear, its use in armed conflict is strictly prohibited by the Chemical Weapons Convention.
But they aren't using it for crowd control. The tactical application here is unbelievably brutal.
It is. It's a mechanism to force a lethal outcome. Well, imagine being in a subterranean trench network. A drone drops a chloropicrin grenade into the bunker. If a soldier cannot get their gas mask sealed in time, the physiological panic is overwhelming.
Because they can't breathe.
Right. You cannot breathe, your eyes are burning, and you begin to violently choke. It overrides every instinct to stay hidden.
So it forces the soldiers to abandon the physical protection of the trench and scramble up into the open air just to get oxygen.
Yes. And the moment they break cover and expose themselves on the surface, they are immediately targeted and annihilated by waiting conventional artillery or sniper drones.
Wow.
It's using a non-lethal chemical to flush humans out like animals into a kill zone.
It is a horrific tactical innovation.
It is. But chloropicrin is relatively primitive. To understand the true apex of state-sponsored chemical weaponry, we have to look at the nerve agents being developed in clandestine laboratories.
Right. The analysis compares the toxicity of frontline riot agents to the substance utilized in the 2018 Salisbury assassination attempt in the UK.
The Novichok attack.
Yes.
If you place chloropicrin at a 1 solin on a hypothetical scale of lethality, Novichok, the agent used in Salisbury, registers at 40,000 to 50,000 on that exact same scale.
50,000 times more toxic. That is almost incomprehensible.
Yeah. Novichok is a 4th-generation synthetic nerve agent. It was specifically engineered by state scientists to do 2 things.
What are they?
Be incredibly lethal in microscopic doses and entirely evade detection by standard NATO chemical warning sensors.
That is terrifying.
Because it binds so persistently to surfaces and is invisible to normal sensors, it took hazmat teams 18 months of meticulous work to fully decontaminate the specific areas of Salisbury where it was deployed.
Which naturally leads the public mind to spiral into absolute doomsday scenarios.
Of course.
Like if a liquid smeared on a door handle can shut down a town for a year, people instantly pivot to the fear of a radiological dirty bomb.
Right. The idea of a terrorist cell wrapping radioactive hospital waste around a block of C4.
Exactly. But surprisingly, the frontline experts largely dismiss the dirty bomb as a chimera. Why are they so unconcerned about that specific nightmare?
Because the physics of radiation make it extraordinarily difficult to hide.
Oh, because of the sensors?
Yes. Modern nations have spent decades building incredibly dense, highly sensitive networks of radiological monitors at ports, borders, and throughout major cities.
So they're always watching.
Radioactive isotopes emit energy that is very easy for sensors to pick up. Attempting to source, transport, and assemble enough radioactive material to construct a viable dirty bomb without tripping an alarm somewhere in that massive security net is nearly impossible.
But hypothetically, if someone did manage to bypass the sensors and detonate one in a financial district, the casualty rate from the explosion wouldn't actually be the main problem, right?
Correct. A dirty bomb is not a nuclear weapon. It doesn't create a nuclear yield.
So it's just a normal explosion.
Right. The explosion itself would only kill the people immediately adjacent to the blast, just like a normal car bomb. The true devastation of a dirty bomb is entirely economic and psychological.
It's an area denial weapon.
Yes.
I like to think of it like someone pouring thousands of gallons of quick-drying cement into the central plumbing of a 50-story high-rise.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because the building doesn't collapse, nobody dies from the cement, but the structure is completely ruined.
Right. You can't live in it, you can't work in it, and you basically had to demolish the entire thing and start over.
Exactly. Radiation integrates into porous materials like concrete and asphalt. The analysis points to the Shard in London, a skyscraper that cost billions to construct.
Oh, yeah.
If a dirty bomb irradiated the interior of the Shard, you couldn't scrub it clean with soap and water. The cost of decontamination would exceed the value of the building.
Wow, so you'd have to tear it down.
The entire multi-billion-pound structure would likely have to be condemned, demolished, and hauled away as hazardous waste.
The economic disruption is astronomical. It is, but the threat is ultimately highly localized to a few city blocks.
Okay, so if chemical weapons are a tactical nightmare confined to the battlefield, and dirty bombs are easily detected and primarily an economic nuisance, what is the actual existential doomsday scenario we are blind to?
The unambiguous consensus among security specialists is that the ultimate civilization-level threat is biological. Specifically engineered synthetic pathogens.
So we are moving from the physics of the battlefield into the microscopic biology of the laboratory.
Yes.
And we need to reframe how we view this because the traditional doctrine regarding bioweapons completely failed us.
It really did. Historically, there was a deeply entrenched pre-COVID mindset within the intelligence community.
Right.
The prevailing theory was that pathogens made for lousy terror weapons due to the incubation period.
Because it takes too long.
Exactly. If a hostile actor releases anthrax spores in a subway, the victims might not show symptoms for a week. Terrorists traditionally seek immediate cinematic destruction.
The instant gratification of an explosion.
Right. They want the big bang, not a slow, invisible spread.
But the COVID-19 pandemic entirely shattered that assumption.
Totally.
It proved that you don't need a skyscraper to collapse to bring the world to its knees.
No. COVID provided a massive, unsolicited proof of concept to every hostile actor on the planet.
How so?
Well, it demonstrated that a pathogen doesn't even need to be particularly lethal to be catastrophic. We faced a virus with a mortality rate of roughly 1% or less, yet it managed to completely paralyze the global economy for years.
Right. It fractured supply chains, grounded global aviation, induced widespread societal panic.
And altered the geopolitical landscape.
So if you are an asymmetric threat, like a terrorist cell or a rogue state, and you realize a low-lethality respiratory virus can inflict more damage on the West than 1,000 cruise missiles.
Biology suddenly becomes your primary weapon of choice.
And this is where the integration of artificial intelligence and synthetic biology makes the threat exponential.
It really does. The technological barrier to editing genomes is collapsing.
The analysis highlights a terrifying tabletop exercise conducted at Cambridge University to model this exact threat.
Yeah, that exercise was eye-opening.
The scenario explored what happens when malicious actors use current AI modeling and CRISPR technology to splice the genetic characteristics of two distinct, horrific diseases into a single superpathogen.
And they focus on Lassa fever, correct?
Yes, Lassa fever.
Right. Lassa fever is a viral hemorrhagic fever endemic to parts of West Africa. It is gruesome, and in specific outbreak scenarios, it can carry an incredibly high mortality rate.
Like around 80% sometimes.
Yes. However, it is relatively difficult to transmit from person to person. It typically requires contact with bodily fluids.
Okay, so it doesn't spread like a cold.
No. So the Cambridge exercise posed a simple, devastating question. What if a synthetic biologist used AI to identify the genetic sequence that gives COVID-19 its highly contagious airborne transmissibility and spliced that into the genetic code of Lassa fever?
Oh man, you would engineer an airborne, highly contagious respiratory virus that kills 8 out of every 10 people it infects.
Exactly. That isn't just a terrorist attack. That is an extinction-level event.
And the facilities capable of doing this kind of advanced genomic editing are springing up everywhere.
The proliferation is the most concerning variable here.
Right.
2 decades ago, there were perhaps a dozen highly regulated biosafety level 3 and level 4 laboratories in the world.
Places like Porton-Down in the UK or Fort Detrick in the US.
Exactly. Today, fueled by the biotech boom, there are thousands of these laboratories scattered across the globe.
And a significant portion of them are operating with minimal oversight, often in geopolitically unstable regions.
Yes. The tools for synthetic biology, like DNA synthesizers and CRISPR kits, are relatively cheap and widely available.
So millions of researchers globally now possess the technical acumen to manipulate genetic material.
Now, to be fair, 99% of this research is vital for human progress.
Oh, absolutely. Developing targeted cancer therapies, agricultural resilience, and new vaccines.
Right. But the dual-use nature of the technology means the mathematical probability of a catastrophic accident or a deliberate malevolent release has increased by orders of magnitude.
Which brings us to the most infuriating part of this entire deep dive.
The funding disparity.
Yes. How we allocate our resources to prevent these threats is entirely disproportionate to the actual risk.
The financial breakdown is incredibly stark.
Break it down for us.
Well, the global community currently spends roughly $500 million annually to monitor compliance and enforce the ban on chemical weapons.
Okay, $500 million.
And we spend billions of dollars every single year securing nuclear material, maintaining sensor networks, and funding atomic energy watchdogs.
Billions. But what is the budget for the Biological Weapons Convention?
You mean the international body whose sole responsibility is to monitor biotech labs and prevent the proliferation of engineered pathogens?
Yes, that one. What's their budget?
The operating budget is roughly $100,000 a year.
$100,000. It's insane.
It really is.
I mean, it's like a corporation spending its entire billion-dollar IT budget building a massive, state-of-the-art firewall to protect against 1990s email viruses, while simultaneously leaving a bowl full of mysterious, infected USB thumb drives sitting on the table in the employee break room.
That's exactly what it's like.
The back door isn't just unlocked, it's wide open. Why on earth is there so much resistance to funding biological oversight?
Well, the pushback is largely economic, driven by the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries.
Big pharma.
Yeah, they operate in an environment of fierce competition where intellectual property is worth billions.
Right, they don't want people snooping around.
Exactly. There is immense, deeply entrenched reluctance to allow international inspectors to walk into their cutting-edge laboratories to monitor synthetic biology work. They fear corporate espionage, IP theft, and bureaucratic delays slowing down their incredibly lucrative research pipelines.
But the cost of a pandemic dwarfs the value of any pharmaceutical patent.
Absolutely.
So what is the proactive defense? We can't just ban biology.
No, we can't. The analysis points to the Omicron variant as a prime example of our current systemic failure.
How so?
Well, Omicron perfectly illustrated the fatal lag in our epidemiological detection grid.
The lag.
When the Omicron variant originally emerged, it took global health authorities roughly 5 weeks to definitively detect its arrival and map its spread within the UK.
And in the context of a highly transmissible virus, 5 weeks is a lifetime.
Exactly. By the time the alarm sounded, hundreds of thousands of infected individuals had already traveled through international airports, seeding the variant into every corner of the globe.
We were fighting a fire that had already burned the house down.
Exactly.
But the technology exists right now to close that gap. The proposal centers on real-time DNA air sampling.
Yes, the hardware is available today.
How does it work?
You can install biosensors that continuously monitor the ambient air in confined high-traffic spaces, specifically the environmental control systems of commercial aircraft.
Okay.
These sensors can perform near real-time automated DNA sequencing on the microscopic biological material present in the air the passengers are exhaling.
Wow. So practically, imagine a long-haul flight arriving in London from a region experiencing an unexplained cluster of illnesses.
Right. As the plane is in the air, the sensors are continuously sequencing. If an anomalous or engineered pathogen is detected, the system flags it instantly.
So before they even land.
Yes. By the time the aircraft touches down on the tarmac, health authorities already know a novel threat is on board.
And they can act?
They can tow the plane to an isolated stand, identify patient 1, quarantine the exposed passengers, and extinguish the outbreak before a single infected person ever sets foot inside the airport terminal.
That is incredible. But I'm guessing the roadblock is the price tag.
It always is.
The estimate provided is an upfront capital expenditure of £10 billion to blanket the UK's transit hubs with this technology, or roughly £1 billion annually to operate it. I can already hear the politicians balking at £10 billion.
Oh, definitely. It is the classic failure of political imagination.
Because of pandemic fatigue.
Yes, lawmakers are suffering from pandemic fatigue. They believe COVID is over, so they don't want to authorize billions for a biological threat that feels abstract.
Right.
But if the next engineered pathogen has the 80% mortality rate of our Lassa fever scenario, £10 billion is absolute pocket change to prevent the collapse of the nation.
It's the ultimate insurance policy.
It really is.
To truly ground all of these massive, terrifying concepts, from drone swarms to synthetic biology, we need to examine the actual career of the man who provided these insights.
Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon.
Yes. His career isn't theoretical. It's a masterclass in how these high-level strategic threats translate into mud, blood, and chemistry on the ground.
His operational history proves that survival on the modern battlefield requires extreme intellectual agility, not just raw firepower.
Tell us about his deployment to Afghanistan.
Well, it's a perfect example. The intelligence flagged that the Taliban were stockpiling vast quantities of industrial chemicals,
Like for weapons.
specifically highly corrosive acids and alkalis used in the massive illicit heroin trade.
Oh, okay.
And they discovered a cache of 100 tons of these precursor chemicals.
100 tons. Now, standard military operating procedure when you find enemy munitions is brute force, right? Load it onto a convoy, drive it out into the empty desert, and blow it up with C4.
But the reality of the battle space made that impossible.
Why?
Transporting 100 tons of highly volatile, explosive precursor chemicals across miles of hostile territory teeming with Taliban fighters was essentially a suicide mission.
Oh, yeah, they just ambush it.
Exactly. Furthermore, they couldn't detonate it in place because if 100 tons of chemicals exploded near the coalition base, it would cause mass casualties among their own troops and local civilians.
So, what did he do?
Instead of using explosives, he leaned on his expertise and used chemistry.
I love this part.
He analyzed the stockpile and realized they had roughly 50 tons of acid and 50 tons of alkali.
And so...
Instead of blowing it up, they meticulously mixed the two opposing chemical bases together in a controlled manner.
the chemical reaction neutralized the toxicity.
Exactly. Turning 100 tons of deadly bomb-making material into a massive puddle of harmless, pH-neutral water.
That is a brilliant illustration of outthinking the enemy when brute force fails.
It really is. And he brought that same philosophy of accelerated innovation to forensic intelligence as well.
The DNA testing initiative.
Yes.
Because the legacy system was painfully slow. Like, if a patrol found a roadside IED, they would swab the device for the bomb maker's DNA, put the swab in an evidence bag, and fly it all the way back to a laboratory in the UK for analysis.
And the entire round trip took 14 days.
In an active war zone, 14 days is an eternity.
It gives the bomb maker 2 full weeks to build a dozen more devices, relocate to a new province, and completely vanish.
So the colonel bypassed the logistical chain entirely.
Yes. He acquired portable PCR equipment, the exact same polymerase chain reaction technology the entire world became intimately familiar with during COVID testing, and deployed it directly into the combat zone in Afghanistan.
By pushing the laboratory to the absolute edge of the front line, he collapsed the forensic timeline from 14 days down to just 3 hours.
It's a game changer.
A patrol could swab a defused bomb at sunrise, process the DNA on base, and have the exact identity of the terrorist in hand before noon.
Allowing special forces to raid the compound before the bomb maker even knew the device had been discovered.
That kind of on-the-fly innovation is what led him to the most perilous chapter of his career in Syria.
Definitely.
The analysis details his operation guiding a BBC documentary crew deep into Syria in 2013, straight into an active, chaotic war zone where journalists and aid workers were routinely being targeted and kidnapped.
And his mission wasn't just protective detail. It was investigative.
What was he looking for?
He went into Syria to gather irrefutable forensic evidence of the chemical weapons atrocities being committed by the Assad regime against civilian populations.
Right.
He stood up a dedicated CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear task force right in the middle of the conflict.
And the goal was twofold, right? Train locals to medically treat nerve gas casualties and systematically collect physical evidence of the attacks.
Exactly. And the evidence collection was meticulous.
Now,
This wasn't just taking photos.
he was collecting soil samples and biomedical samples that maintained a rigorous chain of custody.
Yes. The physical evidence he extracted literally had his own DNA on it to prove it hadn't been tampered with.
And that exact evidence is currently being utilized by the United Nations and the French judicial system to build war crimes prosecutions against high-ranking members of the Assad regime.
It is a direct, unbroken line from crouching in the rubble of a Syrian town to the highest courts of international justice.
Which culminates in a deeply surreal postscript to his time in the Middle East.
And really does.
Based on the timeline provided in his account, noting a significant geopolitical shift where Assad has fallen and a new, ostensibly secular government has taken power, the colonel recently returned to Damascus.
This is the part that truly exposes the chaotic whiplash of global geopolitics.
Right. He flies back to Syria, walks into a government building, and finds himself sitting across a conference table from the very ministers, faction leaders, and intelligence chiefs who spent the last decade actively trying to hunt him down and kill him.
And what are they doing?
They are politely asking him for his expert advice on how to rebuild the security infrastructure of the country.
I mean, it is a staggering psychological pivot.
It is.
It perfectly encapsulates the inherently fluid, almost mercenary nature of modern statecraft.
Huh.
The mortal enemies of yesterday seamlessly transition into the political clients of today when the power dynamics shift.
Okay, let's pull all the way back and look at the aggregate of everything we've unpacked today. We have covered a colossal amount of terrain.
We really have.
Yeah.
We have dissected the rust and bureaucratic paralysis that is actively hollowing out conventional Western militaries.
Right.
We've analyzed the hyper-accelerated, terrifying skies of the Ukraine laboratory, where mass armor is being dismantled by cheap software.
Yeah.
And we have stared directly into the microscopic, dangerously under-regulated frontier of synthetic biological threats.
It is a lot to process. The overarching theme is that the friction of war is moving away from the physical and into the digital and biological.
Very true.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, something that takes all these threads and pulls them into a rather chilling conclusion.
Okay.
Historically, massive civilization-altering wars were constrained by simple economics. The power to destroy a city was exclusive,
Only massive nation-states could afford it.
Exactly. They were the only ones who could afford the logistical infrastructure, the uranium enrichment, the aircraft carriers, and the fighter jets required to project apocalyptic power. But if the future of warfare is defined by a $500 autonomous drone swarm or an AI-generated synthetic pathogen cooked up in an unregulated commercial lab, then the fundamental power to wage war has been radically democratized.
Democratized destruction.
Yes. If a tiny faction of extremists, or even a single, highly capable individual, can now wield the kind of destructive capability that once belonged exclusively to the superpowers of the Cold War, how does human society actually adapt?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do we maintain open, democratic societies in a world where the barrier to entry for global disruption is no longer a multi-billion-dollar defense budget, but little more than a credit card, a laptop, and an internet connection?
It completely changes the calculus of global security.
We started this deep dive talking about how the old math of warfare is broken.
Right.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape of global security that is no longer a clean, predictable X-ray.
It is undeniably and terrifyingly murky waters.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the world around you.